Good evening. It's once again time to discuss what we just saw. And what we just saw was the 64K intro compo here at Assembly 2019. Total of 3 entries. And as we've pushed in the past few years to have a 64K compo back, it's a little disappointing for the number. And some people would say, well, but Truck, you didn't make one. That is true. That is a very good point. I did not. That does not mean to have one for next year. Everyone else should also. And that's enough to be said about that. Make more 64Ks. I have with me Fizzer, and darn it, my brain just completely went out the window. Muffin Trap.
Yeah.
And they're here to discuss what we just saw. I've put the lid on the number of entries.
Okay.
Did either of you want to say anything about that? Because I'll open it back up for discussion if we need to.
No need to.
Okay.
No.
64Ks. I don't believe you've made one,
No,
but I know
haven't made one, but it seems its time is ripe for that now.
and I know
needs it.
I know you do size coding.
Yeah, I tried. I did one 4K for instance.
Yes. And Fizzer, you're somewhat known for size coding.
I suppose. I've made a few.
So perhaps what would attract someone to making a 64K? How could they get started? I'll start with Muffin Trap.
Yeah, for my 4K I did, it was in C, then I used in Linux. Okay, I could rely on SDL 1.2 or 2.2, and I could use OpenGL 1, very few function calls, and then I did all these tools like stripping the executable using elf kickers, stripping it a bit more, and then using this, was it Soplift, something like that, like a recursive compression.
Aha.
Recursive, really.
Yeah, one guy hinted me that there's this guy at Google who has made that program. So it makes a zip file, but it takes a long time because it makes many rounds. And then you make a bash script to unscript it and unzip it and then run it. And I tried to cram in there like MIDI reader or something like that. But in the end, I only had like D, playing sine waves. But for 64K, I think I would do something with the music.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have the space that you use to make the stuff for the 4K, and then you'd have more space to tell your story, to put your music, and similar.
Yeah.
Fizzer, what would you? I mean, you're much smaller. What would make you go larger?
Actually, I mean, I like the idea that it's more space.
Yes.
And I've never even tried making a 64K, but I've made 4Ks and at least 2 8Ks. And even the difference between 4K and 8K is actually a really huge amount. Like it's not really just double the space. It's way more. And in both of the 8Ks that I've made, actually, I didn't even really have to try hard to compress the shader code and the data. I just could keep adding and adding more and more stuff, and the size wouldn't really get any bigger. So if I use that approach to make a 64K, I don't really know what I would do.
Yeah, you might end up with what happens a lot of times. Well, I started with the plan of a 64K. It's 32K, and I don't have anything more to put in, so I'm done. It's smaller.
Yeah, shaders too. I would definitely put in some shaders, maybe.
Yeah. And there's there are a number of tools that can be used for making music and so forth with this. In fact, I think 64clang now works under Linux as well.
I don't know about that.
I'm not 100%
writing my
sure.
own synth first.
Oh, that's a challenge, and that can be a load of fun as well. How would somebody? I mean, you've assumedly started this already, yes?
Yeah, it plays a sine wave.
Okay, well,
And you can give it notes and it has channels and so on, but it doesn't quite. I tried to make this tool chain that I can take a MIDI, then take like the important stuff, compress it, and then it would be able to read it and feed it to the SDL, but it's halfway there.
Linux is pretty interesting as a platform now, actually, for size coding. There's been some quite interesting recent productions. If you've heard of this one singer called Blackle, and well, she did a really impressive procedural 4K graphics at Revision this year, and this was with Linux.
yes.
And because on Linux you have a lot of kind of libraries already at your disposal, you can skip a lot of the sort of the boilerplate stuff that you usually get on Windows. So I think there's a lot of potential for Linux, and I want to try it myself, actually.
Not only that, but to that point, Blackle and Portion, they've got a wiki together, and they've got a IRC channel, and they have created lists that say, okay, this function is available from this library, and these are all on your standard Ubuntu distribution that's going to be running on most of your Compo machines.
Yeah.
And then Portion often is in touch with the organizers to find out exactly if there are any differences so that people can know. Now, I do want to ask a question because this is something that we assume is happening. As you know, Fizzer has done a number of productions, and he's somewhat, I would say some people would consider him the top tier, along with a couple of other folks, but of making these size coding productions. Does that scare you? Does that mean, I can't reach that point? Or have you just put that aside, or did that ever bother you?
I think the main motivation right now is for me the synth is interesting, how to make us very simple, because I like chiptune also.
Yeah.
So how would I make something like that sound like that and make it so that I could ask my friends who are better musicians than I am to just give me a MIDI file and define the instruments, and I can put it in the 4K or 64K. So for me, finding out and making my own thing instead of like competing.
Right. So for you, it's the challenge of doing it, and whatever place you come in, that doesn't really. It's nice, but it's nice. The challenge that is there that is attractive.
And
to
it's
you.
Also at the instance I made a demo, and people came to say to me that, oh, that was really nice. I wish I was longer. I didn't place well, but it was more meaningful. I think.
Cool.
To have like, oh, somebody really liked that.
Yeah, that's good.
Fizzer, you were a starter at one point.
Of course. I think we all were.
Did it scare you to get started in doing things?
Not well. It's hard to say whether I was scared or not. Maybe intimidated. Maybe thinking, oh, I'll never be this good. And demos that I really loved at the time when I was first starting to get into the demo scene. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh, I'll ever be able to reach this kind of level. I still don't really think I have, but I learned as I went, and I think the best thing is really to actually keep making stuff, and you learn by doing that, and you also, I mean, as you say, you still have people that appreciate something, even if it didn't come number one or isn't the best thing that you ever made. I think I had a lot of encouragement as well. So I joined the scene at a time when we were all kind of past the the 80s and 90s elitism and arrogance and stuff. So I think I was quite lucky in that I wasn't rejected as being a noob or lame or whatever.
That is true. We did chase some folks away, and we even did that here. It's one of the reasons why we've had the scene booth at one point, and now we have the scene lounge, just to welcome people and let them know that, look, this is a community that actually, okay, you are going to get negative feedback, but the positive feedback outweighs that. Mm-hmm. All right, perhaps we should talk a little bit about the productions. There are a few areas that I would just love to go into as far as the conversation we've just had, but perhaps we'll come back to that. Maybe we should step through them all, maybe just in a random. The first production, Vizor, you said you took some notes.
I did, yes.
Do you remember what its title was? I am a great host because I know what the titles are of all three productions. I have no idea. Go ahead.
Of course, it's LA 1984, I think.
Yeah,
I think so.
I have the titles too.
That would make sense because it's obviously referring to Terminator.
Yeah.
And the first Terminator movie came out in 1984, and it was set in LA.
Yes, that's correct. I must stop you. Is the third production, does it also have a number in it?
No.
Okay, thought there was a pattern there. Please continue.
It's not a whole lot of content. The first intro. It came off to me in terms of the aesthetic as quite Amiga-ish actually.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a built-in workbench font or something.
It is not.
It's quite okay. You know, it wasn't familiar to me, but it reminded me of like my first experiments in BASIC. Maybe it's a bit nostalgic for me. I don't know. Yeah, I think it was. I didn't get to read all of the text because I was trying to take down notes at the same time. But I guess it's basically the synopsis, the first Terminator movie. So it's an interesting idea, and the color scheme. Actually, I really liked the pure blue look. I've been meaning for a while to actually make a whole demo with like just blue channel stuff because for some reason I really like the look of that against like a black background. So I liked that part of it. Yeah, and the revealing of the logo was cool.
Yeah, yes it was. I will say one of the things about having these really good beamer systems that we have here is that we're able to see blue on black on this big screen. There is a famous Amiga demo called Darkroom, and I'd recommend you see it. It's a fantastic demo, but when it was shown at assembly back in the day, they were looking at it on one of the monitors, and it didn't show the colors. The contrast wasn't high enough because it's a monitor, so it placed very low, and it's an incredible demo. And there are people that have said, well, I don't remember this. But other people do remember it because it was that blue on black. So that is a risk that was taken there, and it actually did turn out quite well. What did you think of the first one?
Yeah, it started dropping these Terminator hints, like, all right, Terminator. I want to see shiny robots or something. And all right, now it's the logo. It's starting. It has been pre-calculating all this time. I also wonder, oh, no. That was like my feeling. There was this build-up, like Terminator is coming now.
That would have been a cool drop, actually, to have like a shiny robot there.
All the time I thought, oh, this is the pre-calculating part. They're just doing these simple things.
That would have been fantastic if you could have, because a simple text writer and the simple geometry in the background with that as a way of, instead of doing your loader bar.
Yeah.
I think it's possible that this one might have just run out of time. Or perhaps they're going to drop the robots on us in another thing.
Seen that
I would
before.
hope so. Yeah. How about the second production? What did you think of it? I guess it's a kind of an invite.
Yeah, it turned out to be an invite. It reminded me of this brutalistic design, and about in Paris there's the De Gaulle airport with these concrete floors and these little white bumps in the floor, and I kept seeing them in the demo. And I think that everyone who has spent some time at the De Gaulle will remember the white little things. And these markings look like this, follow this line to Terminal 2.
Yeah, right.
But it was, all the elements were flashing and spinning so fast it was hard to find like anything coherent in the demo, but it gave me the idea of like urban, like concrete and lines and airports and utility.
I did
That
see.
kind of like feeling.
I did see the concrete, like a painting on concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, a roller or something like that. I also got that. What did you think, Fizzer?
I quite liked it. By the way, I believe that some of the playback wasn't as intended. I believe that maybe there was something wrong with the capture or something. But yeah, I think the spinning was running too fast. But I think it turned out pretty well anyway, and the sync was pretty good. I think like the look of it reminded me of like, well, the title was 1989, and it reminded me of 80s style sort of like furniture design or something. Like it was this grey background with these like red and yellow strips.
Right.
And I kind of remember having like when I was in that kind of like fabric design was everywhere in the 80s. And
Also, then Nintendo 8-bit, like the grey box and
Yes,
sharp
exactly.
red accents and black accents. And
yes,
that
actually,
kind of thing.
actually the Super Famicom box had the same color scheme and the same lines.
Yeah,
design,
like
actually,
these very basic colors on a grey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's very 80s in a way.
I think like I actually really miss that stuff. This consumer item sort of visual design and aesthetic.
Yeah, I remember there were some Amiga manuals or books that were written that were later in the lifetime, and they used that same bright color with, well, again, maybe the texture roller type of paint effect. And it is very much a late 80s thing, 89, that type of thing.
The invitation, if I may say just now, was for the party rsync.
Yes, which will be in Belgium in January, I believe. I should know this.
In January, yeah.
Yes. And as you know, our friend Frankie is from Belgium, and so you will probably see him there. I do know a little bit about this production, and I heard that run faster on the Compo PC than it was expected. But at that point, it was, you know what? I'm happy. The production is in.
Yes.
It's running on the Compo PC. We don't have to debug it any further.
Yeah. I believe Metorikos, who created it, put a lot of effort into it.
Yes.
I think she was working through the night actually to get it done, submitted.
That is one of the things that does occur when you have the compos. It's people work on them up until the deadline, and I think in this case, yes, that actually was the case.
Yeah, and I also thought maybe they had like a 120 hertz monitor where it was smooth, and then you saw it on a Beamer 60 and then just ghosting.
We also saw that technical issue come up in the one scene compo where someone had written a Python production and it did flicker on the screen. These are technical learn to deal with, and then there's also one of the productions in the one scene thing mentioned testing on Windows. It was a Linux thing, and testing on another platform is very, very important, especially since we don't see very many cross-platform productions.
True. This is, by the way, this is the first time I've been to Assembly, and it's the first time I've been to a demo party with pre-recorded demos. It's kind of a new thing for me to have to factor in the fact that it's going to be encoded and recorded and then played. So it's got, I mean, it's nice in a way, but in another way, you have to prepare for that a bit.
You do have to, and it is a little bit different than seeing it run on the compo thing.
It is different, yeah.
Let's talk about the last production, and then let's come back to that, because there's a question I'd like to ask both of you about that specific thing. What was the title of the third, since I'm such a great host and I wrote them down?
I think
Devolutional design, like backwards design, something like that. I just written design.
I actually didn't get it. I wrote down motivation or something.
Yeah.
So
Best guests and host ever. Okay, so the third production, which we will now refer to as number 3. What did you both think about it?
Yeah, it was very classic. Like, let's have geometric shapes and like this ray matching thingy. And I like that they choose like this, not just the coder colors, but like this, like how do you say in English? Broken orange and yellow, orange and blue. And I like the look of the material. It wasn't just glass; it looked also like it would be oily or wet, and it reminded me of these like mirror houses in amusement parks, like because
Yeah.
everything was like mirrors, and it kept flowing like water. So I think the materials, like the main point, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I know a little bit of background about the demo. I
Please.
know that the code is actually it's a bit recycled code from a few years
Okay.
back. A compo filler actually,
Ah,
but it's a good one actually. Yeah, it's it's a solid intro really, and nothing particularly bad to say
yeah.
about it.
No, I mean, and again, there's nothing wrong with recycling code from earlier productions as long as you don't recycle the same demo. That typically will not get you very far if you put the same demo in twice. Someone will notice.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing I was going to come back to, one of the things about pre-recording the demos is that, of course, we don't have to see the pre-calc. That is not included in that. And we talked a little about it in the previous compostudio about how that is different than other parties. And do you think that not seeing the pre-calc, do you think the pre-calc adds or subtracts anything from the actual ultimate production?
A sound library called Oidos before, and it serves like the same purpose as Folkline for making music for small intros.
Okay.
But Oidos must pre-calculate the music before the intro plays. It can't calculate it in a separate thread, and this annoys me no end. Because Oidos, it produces really awesome sounds, and I've had great stuff from musicians using Oidos, but people in the audience really don't like the pre-calc. And I've had people actually not really know that the pre-calc is for the music, and it can be so long that some people think that it's like pre-calculating all the frames for the demo actually, because they figure out, oh, there's actually enough RAM here to keep all the frames in memory. So on the other hand, I do kind of like to see pre-calc, like some video elements, and I like to know that this has been pre-calced or not. I kind of do factor that into my judgment of a demo.
Yeah, I do the same. If I see that there's a bit of pre-calc, then my brain says, okay, they're doing some pre-calculation so that it looks smoother. But if there's like you said, if there's a lot of pre-calc, I'm figuring, oh, they're just rendering a movie and they're going to play it back. So you kind of play with that, and of course, as a demo creator, there are things you can do to trick people with that. Seven's classic loader bar that went this far and then went up and then did this and then did the fantastic joke from him.
I was gonna say, like, are we including loading bars? Because that's actually a really cool opportunity for creativity.
Yes, yes. We've seen some very fascinating loader bars over the years. What do you think about the difference between? I mean, do they show it? Because I promised I would go to Instancy, and then I was busy with work, so I couldn't go this year. But do they show the loader bars at Instancy?
Yeah, they show everything live.
Yeah.
Like, but about the loading bars, maybe if it's just nothing is happening, then you could like include it in the where's the title and name, like, so the audience doesn't have to sit through that.
Yeah.
But during the demo, I think it's like, it's interesting how they can do like this easy scene and then pre-calculate or do this load bar. So I think it's like you can use it very creatively and then also make a better looking demo by using pre-calc. But maybe there would be some indication if it's like everything is preloaded, or you see like 20 seconds of pre-calc, like, oh, now I'm suspicious. But if it's like yeah, maybe that would be kind of compromise in a way, because I understand it's much slower, like safer to pre-record the demos in a event like assembly.
Yes, it is safer.
In
And
instance, we had like more like relaxed, like not so many demos.
if if the production goes wrong live, there's not that to fix it on the fly,
Yeah.
and no one wants to see that with this gargantuan screen and this huge audience. You want it to be a smooth experience, both for the audience and also for the people involved in it. But yeah, you mentioned with the first production that it might even have been a loading thing for it. So again, yeah, all sorts of creative things that you can do with that loading and that pre-calc. So, well, there's an opportunity for people to be creative.
And as an example, something I learned about recently from this old MS-DOS demo from the 90s. Actually, it's the Noon demo, Stars.
Stars.
Wonders of the World, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, I never knew this until now. There's a part with a 3D model of a wasp, and it's supposedly got this polygon record-breaking number for the time.
Yes.
And it's supposedly real time. But apparently what they did, because this is like in the middle of the demo,
Yeah.
and at the first parts of the demo there are some like static images and stuff, and it's during this time in the demo it's actually pre-calculating the rendered images of the wasp. So it's like, it's not a pre-calc, it's like a I don't know, like a parallel calc during the actual running of the demo. It's pretty smart, and I actually like that a lot better than pre-rendering or pre-calcing.
Yeah,
it's a smart solution.
I agree. It's also an engineering challenge that we don't necessarily see in things, and this is where people oftentimes, you're traditional. You have a graphician, you have a coder, and you have a musician, and well, there's no place for anybody else. The people that are making the tool chains, the people that are on the C64, you have the people that are working on the loaders. That because loading on Commodore 64 from is being done over the serial port from the disk drive, and that's extraordinarily slow. So that's speeding up. These are engineering challenges that different types of people can get involved with. There's so many opportunities for people to be creative with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I will throw it now. Case, perhaps the previous competitions, assembly in general.
I think there's a great opportunity to create some now. There's something of a glut for some reason. I really, maybe I'll make one myself, and I really want to see other people just go for it and try to make one as well.
Cool. And as one of the people who is at the top, I know that a lot of times you're challenged more by the people coming up, and it's exciting to see other people doing things as well.
Yep.
Any comments from you?
For me, it's I'm happy that the 64K is at assembly, because that year when they showed the Fermi's Paradox by Mercury, I was like, oh, you can do that. I want to do that. That's really cool. Like how they did the physically correct rendering of the planets, and so that got me interested. So I'm working on my way there. But first the second 4K, I think, for the instance. That's my next goal. But one day I want to try 64K too.
Yeah, I think Mercury is something of a sleeping giant now. I think it's about time for a new Mercury. Like Mercury was the new Farbrausch, you could say.
In a way, you could say that.
So maybe it's time for the next one. So.
They might show up sometime, and they might not. It's a bit of a threat. All right, I think we'll throw it back out there. There's a demo compo coming up, but then later on, after the demo compo, there's also the shader showdown, and you do not want to miss this. You want to come here, and you want to see people creating things live. It will be an event to see. So, demo compo, and then shader showdown. We will see you in a while.
Bye.